Welcome to all. We are discussing about the various perspectives in child development and its educational implications. And we can see that when we look at the various perspectives, it can be divided into various ways, and the most important thing is that if we want to understand a child, one perspective is not enough. So, in this session we are going to discuss about cognitive perspective in child development and its educational implications. In this video we will discuss the following main points as the three approaches related with cognitive development. They are Piagetian approach or cognitive developmental approach, information processing approach, and developmental cognitive neuroscience approach. And at last we will also discuss the educational implications of cognitive perspective. After watching this video, you should be able to develop understanding about the cognitive perspective in child development, to categorize the three approaches related with cognitive development, to summarize the educational implications of cognitive perspective in child development. While discussing the cognitive perspective, let us state a case situation where the cognitive perspective is relevant. When 3-year-old Faisal is asked how raindrops look like, he answers, "It looks like teardrops." When his 11-year-old sister Amina is asked the same question, she replies, "The shape of raindrops is based on their size. If it is small, it is spherical in shape, and if it is large, the shape gets distorted until it breaks into smaller drops." And the answer of their cousin Bushra, studying meteorology in graduation, includes a discussion on the shape, surface tension of water and air pressure pushing on the falling raindrops. In this case, you can see the responses of students who belongs to various age range. How does a developmentalist interpret these responses? A developmentalist using cognitive perspective will analyze the above answers in terms of one's degree of knowledge and understanding or cognition. The cognitive perspective is concerned with the development of a person's thought processes. It looks into how we think and interact with the world. So, the thinking process is very much important in cognitive perspective. When we think of this perspective, three approaches are involved in cognitive developmental perspective. The first one, we can term it as Piagetian approach or cognitive developmental approach. Second one, information processing approach, and third one, the developmental cognitive neuroscience approach. Let us discuss each approach in detail. While we are discussing the Piagetian approach or cognitive developmental approach, here the proponent of this approach is Jean Piaget. He contributed a lot, or he has contributed an important theory of cognitive development. Based on this theory, this perspective focuses on how children construct their understanding of the world as they pass through 4 stages of cognitive development through assimilation, that is responding according to existing schemas, and accommodation, that is modifying a schema to fit new information. Each of these age-related stages consist of different ways of thinking. In Piaget's words, it is said that children think differently from adults. Here we can see the stage specific focus upon the perspective of child development. So, Piaget is emphasizing that the child is passing through different stages which is qualitatively different from each other. Let us see Piaget's stages of cognitive development. In the first stage, that is the sensory motor stage, that occurs between birth to 2 years, and the feature is infants gain knowledge of the world through their senses and motor skills. Coming to the second stage, that is the pre-operational stage, which occurs between 2 to 7 years. There we can see children begin to use words and numbers to represent aspects of the world through her or his perspective. Coming to the next stage, that is concrete operational stage, which occurs between 7 to 11 years, children begin to think logically about concrete things but have difficulty in understanding abstract concepts. And the last stage, that is formal operational stage, which occurs between 11 years and beyond. There the adolescents think about abstract and theoretical concepts. They use logic to find creative solutions to problems. So, this is all about Piaget's stages of cognitive development. Then in this Piagetian stage, we can see that he is emphasizing the stage specific development of the child, but it is not emphasizing the environment, which is an important aspect which influences the growth and development of a child. Coming to the second perspective, that is information processing approach, there we can see that it traces the ways individuals manipulate information, monitor it and strategize about the information. As this approach is built from Piagetian research, it is also known as Neo-Piagetian approach. It explains how the thinking process of children develops through childhood and adolescence. Unlike children, adolescents develop a larger capacity for processing information, enabling them acquire more complex knowledge. This stated that, like a computer, human cognition contains hardware and software. But this hardware and software is mental hardware and mental software. What does this mental hardware means? This mental hardware consists of cognitive structures including different memories where information is stored. The mental software includes organized sets of cognitive processes that assist individuals to complete specific tasks. So, let us understand how this approach explains thinking process during childhood and adolescent stages. It is similar with the advancements made in personal computers. Compare the computers built a decade ago with that of modern computers. The modern computers have better hardware and software. Likewise, older children and adolescents have better mental hardware and better mental software. You may get more vividness when you observe that older children easily solve mathematical problems better than younger children who rely more on calculators. An important aspect of development is to learn good strategies for processing information. Coming to the developmental cognitive neuroscience approach, the goal of this approach is to know how brain function gives rise to mental processes such as logical thinking, reasoning and vision. This approach looks at cognitive development through the lens of brain processes. Developmental cognitive neuroscience is an interdisciplinary scientific field devoted to understanding psychological processes and the neurological basis in the developing organism. Older children and adolescents have better hardware and better software, and here we can see that the important aspect of development is to learn good strategies for what is that in order to process the information. It examines how the mind changes as children grow up, interrelations between that and how the brain is changing, and environmental and biological influences on the developing mind and brain. Here in the developmental cognitive neuroscience, it works upon the two principles. The first one, different information processing operations are performed at different brain areas, and a cognitive performance consists of breaking down the overall task into component information processing activities and determining the area of brain that performs the activity. This approach has taken into account the neurological activity that underlies thinking, reasoning and other cognitive behavior. For example, consider the interrelation between motor skills and visual motor coordination that requires high cognitive functions which attains maturity by late adolescence. We see children suffering from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, a developmental disorder that affects both cognitive and motor functioning. In many children with cognitive developmental disorders, movement deficits are evident. More research is underway on dyslexia, specific language disorder and autism. Interaction of genetic and environmental factors during development is another area of concern of developmental cognitive neuroscience psychologists. Thus, this approach studies how the physical brain and nervous system along with other intangible factors lead to patterns of thought and behavior. Now, we are going to discuss about the educational implication of cognitive perspective. When we look at Piagetian perspective, we can see that the Piagetian perspective on qualitative development had an important impact on education. We may note that many educational programs are now built upon the belief that children should be taught at the level for which they are developmentally appropriate. Or otherwise, we may say that the age appropriate curriculum that is important. Like that, we can say that the developmentally appropriate curriculum is needed. Piaget's theory has been applied in many ways, from the creation of innovative learning toys for children to the ways teachers plan lessons. Beyond this, a number of instructional strategies have been derived from Piaget's work that includes providing a supportive environment, utilizing social interactions and peer teaching. Coming to the information processing approach, it has great implications in teaching and learning process, especially for students with learning and behavioral problems. As a teacher or as a learner, you could modify your teaching learning environment to facilitate the attention of students to various metacognitive strategies. So, what is this metacognitive strategies mean is that it is a strategy which makes the learner to think of his or her own thinking pattern. So, how he has arrived to a particular solution, what are the processes? While going through that processes, what are the difficulties he or she faced? So, such type of metacognitive thinking is very much needed. This approach also led to the development of Atkinson and Shiffrin model of memory, which is similar to computer analogy. According to this model, memory information is processed in a series of steps. Memory has three distinct stages such as sensory memory, short-term memory and long-term memory. The developmental cognitive neuroscience approach opened new window into normal and abnormal development. It suggested different types of treatment in abnormalities which is useful for handling children in an inclusive setup. So, coming to this educational implications, or when we go for this approach, the cognitive perspective in child development, what we can say is that this perspective is, major emphasis of this perspective is upon the information processing, the thinking process. So, they have rejected the environment. How much the environment influence the growth and development of the child is very much important. Hence, the socio-cultural perspective, which also comes under the cognitive perspective, it deviates away from the Piagetian view or the other information processing observations. In the socio-cultural perspective, Vygotsky is emphasizing that the environment, the context-specific curriculum should be provided. So, that is the importance of the socio-cultural perspective, which we will discuss in the other session. Hence, we can conclude that this cognitive perspective, it lacks several things, like that it is not taking into account the environmental context. So, in short, we can say that the three approaches related with cognitive development are Piagetian approach or cognitive developmental approach, information processing approach and developmental cognitive neuroscience approach. And we have seen the educational implications of these approaches on the cognitive perspective in child development.